Hey YouTube, it's Toots here, and in this video I am going to show you the Elite controller setup that I use for Far Cry 5. Now I know you're thinking, Toot, I've never seen you post a Far Cry 5 video on your channel in my life. What are you doing trying to tell me how I should set up my Elite controller? You're quite right, I've never shown any Far Cry 5 footage before. There's no reason why you should trust that I've got the ultimate setup, and I'm not going to say I have got the ultimate setup, but you know, just have a look, see what you think about how I've got it set up, and maybe it'll inspire you to try something, tweak something a little bit to go with it, and just play around and see if you can find the right Elite controller settings for you. Let's jump right into it. So as you can see here, for the Elite controller I actually use both slots to do different things in terms of button setup. I have one for driving controls and one for on-foot controls. Most people will keep two games, and I do typically keep Siege and Far Cry on-foot controls on my controller, but when I'm going to play Far Cry specifically, I'll then load up the driving controls as well as the on-foot controls. And let's walk through why I do this. Now, before we jump into the Elite controller settings, let's just first take a look at the gameplay settings that I have. I keep vibration on. I don't use aim assist because I'm hardcore. It does make the game really difficult, but it's just the way that I've always been brought up on my Xbox games ever since the original Rainbow Six 3 back in 2002, 2003 time. I've never used auto aim in a video game if I've had the option. Auto drive I keep as manual because I just like to do that myself. Again, with driving and shooting auto aim assist, that is off. Again, that makes it really hard to do. Weapon tagging I've got on here, but I'll probably turn it off later because I don't really need it. I only just switched it on recently, and although it's useful, I find it's a little bit too simple. I prefer to get the binoculars out and do it a bit more hunter style. Enable friendly fire for co-op games, I've got that switched on just because Rainbow Six, that's how I do it. Reticle position, I've got set to offset. I don't actually know the difference between offset and normal. I know it explains the difference, but I've never tried them to see what it's like. Aim type I keep as hold just because I want that extra control. And open in-game party I keep to off because I just don't want strangers joining me. Next, let's take a look at audio and video. So I keep the master volume loud. I use Astro A40s and I just like things to be loud. Music I keep on, obviously, because although the music is very weird, it is actually quite relaxing. I'm English, so I have audio in English, subtitles I have in English also, and I do actually keep the subtitles on. The reason being for this is because I can't always understand what people say in games because there's other noise or accents, so it's nice to be able to keep it there so that I can at least read it if I can't understand. And also, of course, I live with Mrs. Toot, and you know, women be women, they just talk over stuff all the time, so it's nice to have it there so that even when I can't hear what they're saying over her talking, I can still read it. Voice chat I've got on. Yeah, right, voice chat volume 100%, yeah. Pickup threshold, don't really know what it does, keep it at 0. And then brightness adjustment, colorblind mode is off, and screen edge adjust. So brightness adjustment, I think, I'm not sure what it's set as, but just set it for what works for your TV. Doesn't matter what I've got, it's what's on your TV is what matters. Colorblind mode is off because I'm not colorblind, and screen edge adjust. For some reason, if I don't play Far Cry for quite a while, I find that when I switch it on, the screen is too large and I can't see the edges, so I do have to adjust this fairly frequently if I don't play the game for a long time in between sessions. So those are the general overall settings that I keep in Far Cry 5. Now, this is what you came to the video for. Let's take a look quickly at the game controls that I use. Look sensitivity I have down there at around about 40–45%. For the ground controls, I have left button mode switched off because I'm right-handed, vertical look inverted, and I keep my wingsuit pitch inverted also. Now the reason for that is because, again, lifetime growing up with video games, it's just the way it used to be when I was younger. Back when you'd use a computer and you had a joystick, pushing forward on it was always the way to go down. Pulling back is the way you go up. If you think about it, if you're looking down, you push your head forwards. If you're looking up in real life, you pull your head back. It's the way it works if you're flying an aeroplane. So flight controls, you would naturally push forward to go down and pull back to go up. So it's just the way it's always been within me to just have my vertical controls inverted. I've tried to get out of the habit to make my aiming a bit easier on Rainbow Six Siege, but I just can't get out of it. It's in me now, and I have to live with that. So the controls themselves are standard. You can't adjust the controls in the game. You can only change your left buttons and flipping buttons around, but obviously you've just got default controls. So this is how my setup looks for on the ground in Far Cry 5. So let's take a look at how I use my Elite controller for Far Cry 5 when I'm on foot. As you can see here, I've got slot 2 as my on-foot controls, and I've got slot 1 as my driving controls. Normally slot 1 will be taken up by Rainbow Six Siege, and when I put Far Cry 5 in, then I switch slot 1 to be driving, and then I switch between the two depending on what I'm doing. I find that when I'm on foot and I press the X button to jump into the car, by the time I've got into the car, I can easily flick the switch over to driving, and then again, when I jump out of the car by holding X, I can switch back to on foot by the time I've got out the car. Now sometimes I do forget to press it, which does make things a little bit complicated at times, but for the most part when I remember to do it, it does work out pretty well. Let's take a look at how I have the on-foot control set up. So as you can see, I've got the top left paddle mapped to the clicking of the left thumbstick, and the top right paddle I've got mapped to the clicking of the right thumbstick. And this mirrors what I do in Rainbow Six Siege exactly. I use the top left paddle to run, and I use the top right paddle to melee. As I'm jumping between first-person games, it makes sense to synchronize the configuration as much as possible. So here for on foot, the controls are very, very similar to what I use for Siege in that respect. Also the same as Siege, bottom right paddle I have set to the B button, and that means that while I'm moving along, I can just easily crouch without taking my thumb off of the thumbstick and going over to the face buttons. And I use these controls for the thumbsticks on the paddles because when I'm aiming around, I don't want to be clicking a thumbstick and suddenly jerk the reticle up the screen because I've clicked the thumbstick and accidentally moved the stick a little bit, and that's why I map it to the paddles. And then the one difference that we've got here to Rainbow Six Siege is that on the bottom left paddle I have the left bumper mapped. So what this allows me to do is while I'm moving along, I can very easily open up the weapon switching wheel. I do struggle to press the bumpers on the controllers most often. I'm one of those players that uses my index fingers to press the triggers, and it can be quite tricky to move them up to the bumpers. So I just prefer to map the left bumper to the paddle in Far Cry 5, and that allows me to have that extra bit of control when I want to select the weapon wheel when I'm running along. When it comes to the left stick, I use the default curve, and when it comes to the right stick, I also use the default curve. I haven't tried anything else. I'm happy with default. Maybe one day I'll try something else, but for now, default is the way. Triggers, I don't have any dead zones set on that at all. They're perfectly normal. And then for vibration, I keep the triggers down a little bit, and then with the main vibrations in the handles, I use almost maximum. I don't use full because it's a little bit too much, so I just use just below maximum so that I've still got that rumble, but it's not anything that's going to throw me off. And then for brightness, I just keep that down as a minimum to save battery life. Let's take a quick look at some gameplay to see how these controls work. So here I'm running along by pressing the top left paddle, nice and easy. I can use the bottom right paddle to just teabag up and down, and that also allows me to turn at the same time as crouching. If I had to use the face button to crouch, I wouldn't be able to turn at the same time as I'm crouching. It's not something you do a lot during the game, but it just makes it a nicer experience. So again, we can just run, and then as I go into a slide, I can turn at the same time without having to take my thumb off of the right thumbstick. So it gives you that extra little bit of control. And then again, as I'm moving along, I can just very easily hold down the bottom left paddle, bring up the weapon wheel, and change my weapon as I'm running along, very simply. Yes, you could do that by using the left bumper. I just find the left bumper tricky to get to. I just don't find it that comfortable, so I like to use the paddle for this. It feels much more natural to me. And that's my on-foot controls. Now let's take a look at the driving controls that I have set up. So we'll take a quick look at the land and water vehicles configuration within the game itself. Again, all of the left modes are switched off because I'm right-handed. Driving controls I keep as classic. Now I have tried using the shooting configuration because obviously you're used to pulling the right trigger to shoot a gun, but because I play racing games such as Forza, I'm used to using the right trigger to accelerate. So I did try shooting mode to keep the consistency within the rest of the game when I'm on foot using the right trigger to shoot, but I just found that it was a little bit too complicated and I would keep accidentally shooting when I'm trying to drive. So I switched back to classic. So what configuration do I use on the Xbox controller for driving? So this is a bit more of an adjustment to the on-foot controls. As you can see, I've got the top left paddle mapped to left trigger and the top right paddle mapped to the right trigger. So I can drive by holding down the top right paddle, and I can brake by holding the top left paddle. Now the reason for this and combining it with classic is because I've then remapped my right trigger to be the left bumper, which means I can shoot with my right trigger, and I've remapped the left trigger to the right bumper so that I can throw throwables when I'm driving. and that's slightly different to the shooter controls that you get. So I've made the controls here similar to the shooter controls, and I do still have the occasional problem where I accidentally shoot when I mean to drive, but it's just getting used to it. It's a muscle memory thing. And then with the bottom left paddle, I've got that set to down on the D-pad, and that allows me to quickly switch between consumables. And then I've got the B button mapped to the bottom right paddle, which allows me to do handbrake turns, again without taking my thumb off of the thumbstick. If we move on to the left stick, again, I've got the default sensitivity curve, the same as on foot, and the very same for the right stick. Triggers exactly the same as on foot, and vibration is exactly the same as on foot controls, and again for brightness exactly the same as on foot controls. So everything is exactly the same, barring the actual button mappings. So let's take a look at how this configuration plays out in game. So I use my on-foot controls, and then I hold X to jump into the car, and by the time I'm in the car I've switched over to my driving controls. So now here I'm running over Grace, but as well as that I'm holding the top right paddle to drive, and I'm using the right trigger to shoot the guns on top of the vehicle. And there I've used the bottom right paddle to do a handbrake turn and move around while still maintaining control of the right thumbstick. So again here, just top right paddle, bottom right paddle to handbrake turn, and this allows me to keep all of my fingers on the triggers and thumbsticks as they would be normally. Now here, as you can see, I can quickly throw out a throwable just by using the left trigger. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully you've liked it. If you have, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Hit that like button, drop me a comment, whatever you want to do. Just get involved. I look forward to hearing all of the feedback from you guys. So yes, please like, subscribe, share, all that standard YouTube stuff. If you're still here, I can only assume you've enjoyed this video, in which case, please check out one of these other videos that you see on the screen now. On the left, you'll see something that either I or YouTube think that you might like if you've enjoyed this. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the very latest upload that I've made. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.